Hey guys, I'm going to talk to you today about the Grambo Knives Assetto. This is a knife designed by an Australian knife maker, knife guy, made for him by Bestech. It's the OEM thing where you make a design and you get a factory, you look at all the costs and see who can make it for you, and you send them off your CAD design or whatever you do it, and they make you one and they send you a trial one and you say, oh, that's good, but do this, and you send it back. It's that whole process that you see a lot of knife makers that have lots of ideas, but I guess not a full production capacity at their house to be able to make those ideas. You see it happening a fair bit. So this one by Bestech, and the look and the feel he's going for here is very nice knife. So it's like the gentlemanly kind of knife, but with modern features, I guess is a way of looking at it. It's a front flipper. It's got an old-timey-esque pattern. Big old esque there though, because a lot of the things about it are using some pretty current design trends as well. In short though, it's got a bolster, and obviously the titanium one straight up doesn't. Harpoon style blade, M390 steel. This is micarta and titanium. This is just pure titanium. And we're gonna have a bit of a look. Obviously these are nicer knives. They're knives that are sort of probably more of the EDC, Instagrammable, look at my nice knife kind of knife. But because it's sort of how I do things, I took this one out. This one sort of sat in its case. This one I took out and used it like a farmer. And I've got some really good results to report back, and I generally have a positive review to share with you if you'll hear me out. Let's get to it. Alrighty, so what immediately struck me about this knife, the thing that I like the most about it, and the thing that I'll sort of put it as its main feature, aside from, I guess, its looks. If you're buying a knife because you want it to look good, then this is certainly going to sort you out there. I think it's a pretty universally appealing looking knife. Unless you have a real thing against harpoon blades, I think this is a lovely looking knife in general. But something more tangible, something more measurable. What I love about this knife specifically is the grind. This has got a really nice, thin, hollow grind. Right behind the edge there is, you can almost, I feel like my fingertips are almost touching around that blade there. Really, really nice, thin, very usable, very slicey, hollow grind. The steel is M390, which is done via Bestech, which Kane also had the Russ, which is a knife I reviewed about a month and a half ago now. I tested that knife, I did my edge testing, assuming it's the same Bestech M390, which it should certainly be. It's good performing M390, so it cut the rope about 600 times, which is about what Spyderco's from Taiwan will do. So it's pretty good, generally, M390 that's not the softer, not the more, let's just say, Lion Steel-esque performance. Not that it's bad, it's just a little bit on the lower side, So it's got that good sort of mid-level, mid-tier M390. Obviously, you'll get high-quality treatments from small batch or production, custom knife makers and whatnot. But it's going to get a good, solid edge. It's going to hold a good solid edge for a good long time, and the geometry it's presented to you in is going to cut for ages, and it's going to be, even as this is now, because I've used it so much without resharpening it, I wouldn't say this is super sharp anymore, but the best thing about a good hollow grind is that the geometry does a lot of the favors for you, and no matter how bad the edge is, there's still a lot of PSI behind that push as you push this through material, and the concave cheeks of the hollow grind, they don't let material stick to them, so it glides through stuff like cheese and cardboard and stuff that generally does cause friction along the whole blade face. It does bypass that. So I love the hollow grind the most. That's probably my favorite practical thing about the knife. Handle ergos wise, it's absolutely fine. Very, very neutral, not too much tricky business going on there. There's a slight exposed leaf for the sort of subframe or just normal frame lock. Whichever version you get. On the micarta version, it's a bit of a sub-frame lock where the liner lock goes underneath this tile of micarta, but for all intents and purposes, it's going to perform very much just like a frame lock. The exposed leaf of that forms a slight finger choil, finger guard, finger groove that your thumb or your index finger does sort of sit nicely in. There's a bit of mild jimping on the back there, which is mainly, rather than for grip jimping, it's mainly for flip jimping, to grab onto that front flipper and hoik it back and yeet it back and give it a good old front flipping, which it does every time. Absolutely perfectly. So really well done execution on this from Best Tech. And I always sort of discounted Best Tech. I didn't think they were up there with Wii knives and Rayat, but this guy really does feel about on par. The micarta even here is done almost flawlessly. I can't really see an error with it that you'd call an error. There is like a slight gap under where the lock bar is, but it's really probably where you're supposed to have a gap because that lock bar piece is constantly in flux. So there's no rough finishing. They've drilled through it the right way. They haven't drilled through it from behind and splintered it out. And it's sort of just a pretty standard canvas looking micarta, not a burlap or anything like that. It's taken on the grime from my hand. This is Kane's personal knife. It's knife number 1. So poor bugger had his knife number 1 used by a twit like me. But I mean, in response, I can say it's done the hard yards and it's performed well also. So there we are. Now, looks wise, the harpoon is certainly distinct. It doesn't really add too much to the performance of the blade. It just adds a nice sort of top swedge. Basically aesthetic only, which I'm absolutely fine with. I guess it does cause a very sort of trailing point almost effect where it really, really slow graduate to the tip, but the tip still has a little bit of meat behind it to make so it's not super fragile. So overall, harpoon for basically appearances, but yeah, perhaps a slight contribution to tip geometry, but really, it's just because you like the look of it. It's good. You've designed a knife, you've got to make it look a bit different to everyone else's knives. And there's a few front flippers get around these days. Not too many harpoony ones. So there you go. This is a harpoony one for you. Get yourself some harpoon tang. Righto. Pocket clip is done via a sort of pretty standard milled clip. Like, it's got a spring is just because it's flat against, it's like running a parallel line against the scale. Comes away just fine from the knife. I've scuffed this one up just a tiny little bit. You might need to hit that with some other bead blasting if you're too bothered, Kano, when it gets back. But yeah, realistically, it does just fine as a clip. It's not going to be super deep carry. It's actually a little bit shallow carry, but it doesn't seem to really be on everyone's radar with knives like this. These more sort of presentation style EDC knives. Doesn't seem to bother folks as much. I always like a good deep carry clip. I always like a wire clip, but you know what? They often feel cheap, or the feedback is often that they feel cheap. Never from me, but I can see why not everyone puts a wire clip on every knife. I understand. And you know what? If I ever have an issue with it, it's too bad. I'll design my own bloody knife and I'll get someone to make it for me, and it'll be like a little thin stick with a super thin hollow ground blade on it, a deep carry wire clip, and it'll be in magna cut steel, and it'll be great. Maybe I should do that. I don't know. No one else would probably like it. That's my only problem. Anyway, looking over it. Sometimes it's right when I'm reviewing it that I actually find something else that I need to talk about, like a flaw or a fault, or an odds or an ends. It's been here for about 3 months now, I reckon, and it's been used more or less off and on between all the other reviews, and in terms of use, it's been great. So no problems there with use. In terms of fit and finish, it's put together really, really nicely. In terms of basically everything, it is a really good example of one of these OEM designed, excellently made, interestingly thought out little EDC knives that are all the rage right now. So if you like the front flipper mechanism, that's important, because front flippers certainly aren't for everyone. You give someone who doesn't know how to use a knife a front flipper, they'll just go like this. Thanks. But front flipper is definitely something that's a bit of an acquired learning curve, so to speak. But you get it pretty quickly, and this one does perform really well. Absolutely whizzes open, no worries at all. Action is great, assembly is great, the lockup is tight. It's about 40% of the bar goes across onto the bottom, which is par for the course about what you're after. No complaints whatsoever about these guys. They're going to be pricier. They're going to be about $300 or something, I'm sure, for these sorts of materials. I guess that's what you expect. That's what what you pay for. Good materials, good assembly, unique design, not just, I haven't designed it. So someone actually makes knives and plays with these things has done it. Kane's got a few on his site that I think he's doing some mods on as well. but this is kind of the basic 2 flavors. I believe that they're going to come in at first, pure titanium and micarta and titanium bolster. So there you go. What do you reckon? Mainly go in for these because the chap is an Aussie. It's always nice to see an Aussie get involved in the knife world. We're not the most knife friendly country here. We're sort of a little bit, it just doesn't really, it's not as much of a part of our culture, despite Crocodile Dundee. It really isn't much of a part of our culture as you may think. So always cool to see an Aussie knife maker sort of taking some strides and getting stuff done like the big boys in the US. There we go. I think that's all I've got to say. All of the diarrhea I've got to spew about this knife. So I hope you've enjoyed. Definitely give them a look. Hopefully it's February now. Hopefully we've all got some money again. I was going to publish this review, film this review in about Christmas time and upload it in early January, but I saw a few knives get released, and I think just no one had any money at the time of year. Everyone's maxed themselves out over Christmas, and does anyone really ever have money anymore? I don't know, but if you do, this one might be a good thing to sink your few $100 into. I think you can get them right now from Kane, and I'm sure if you can't, he'll let you know when you can. So go and have a look. Great hollow grind, great action, great presentation, great assembly, good steel, good materials. It seems like it's all here to me.